y'all. I'm back. To those who don't know me, my name is Ali. To those who do, my name is Ali. Um, I deleted all my previous videos just because I didn't really like them, but I think I'm going to go back and start doing YouTube again just because I want to advance my career. Um, so today I wanted to talk about something that happened actually not too long ago. It was a couple hours ago, basically, that happened to me here. Um, And a little background on myself. I am a Chicago resident. I love Chicago. I would never move. I would never leave the city. You know what I mean? This is where I live. Um, I've been to a lot of cities before. I've been to LA, California. I've been to Atlanta. I've been a bunch of places, and it's not like Chicago. Nothing is like Chicago. You know what I mean? Um, and I live specifically in the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park here, and it's a very beautiful neighborhood. It is a very affluent neighborhood, lots of culture here, lots of great food. You know what I mean? I'm a little bit different than the north side. The north side's very much so, and by north side I mean the loop itself. It's very fast paced. It's very, you know, not a lot of time for things. There's a lot of fucking, the same things that go on. Not a lot of culture. It's very just, big, tall buildings, concrete jungle esque type thing. But over here, Hyde Park is very much more relaxed, very much more residential as opposed to touristy. So because of that, I love my neighborhood. If I were to be born again anywhere in the world, it would be Chicago. A little bit more background. I am a Muslim. You know what I mean? I follow the religion of Islam. I believe in one God, which is Him God. I don't believe in any sort of successors to God. I don't believe in a predecessor of God, and I believe in all of the prophets. I believe in Jesus and Muhammad and Prophet Adam, everyone, Prophet Noah. I mean, all of them are beloved prophets, and we very very truly love all of them. In particular, I do want to mention as well that we also believe that Jesus is the Messiah. In Islam. Jesus is a beloved prophet. He is a great man that we very much so respect. So the story that I want to go on is basically my family was here today in Chicago, and they live in the surrounding suburbs, but they came out over to Chicago to see me today. And basically, what happened was my mom in particular my whole family is Muslim, but my mom in particular is very Muslim. She looks very Muslim, she acts very Muslim, and she wears the hijab. She has the long sleeves, the whole 9 yards of what a Muslim woman would look like, basically. And while we were walking on 53rd, um, basically in the downtown area of Hyde Park. Where like the fucking um, all the restaurants and shit, like where that those areas are at, basically. And there was a man who came up and was walking right next to us. And obviously, it's a shared space, so there's nothing wrong with that. But as he was walking, he noticed very clearly that my mother is a Muslim and that we are a Muslim family. So as we're walking, he comes up right next to us and he starts basically chanting. He thought that he was going to be the change. He wanted to be the change today. You know what I mean? And I respect that he was able to speak his mind so well. Um, and I respect that he wanted to be the change. You know what I mean? Um, it's just that his form of change was very anti-Muslim. And as we were walking, he was chanting and he was screaming things like, "Death to Allah, die Allah, curse Allah, die Allah." It was insane. It was so funny, bro. And then he comes up to my mom in particular, because she's wearing the hijab and everything. And then he starts saying these slurs, and I'm not going to mention them, but he starts saying, like, "Your shit, bitch, F word, N word, God is a false fucking God." Um, and then he was like, "You guys are bitches, false followers." And then he walks away. I mean, the thing is, he wouldn't look us in the eye either. He was just like screaming about it. And then as he was walking away, he was like, "That's why Iran is losing. That's why Palestine is losing. It's because your God is fake." And God, it was so fucking funny just hearing him fucking do that stupid shit, dude. Um, And also mention to all Muslims, bro, don't let that shit affect you. It's not real, dog. These guys are all just, whatever people. But it got me thinking, um, is there really a, a, an uptide of religious animosity in the U.S., or is there an uprising of uneducation, that's becoming mainstream? If I were to go back to that man, and I wish I knew his name, I was trying to call him, but he didn't want to respond to me. He just kept walking. And I pray for that guy, bro. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm sure he's just going through it, and he's just needs to take it out on Muslims, I guess. But if I were to sit down with that guy and I were to ask him a question, the only question would be, have you met a Muslim before? Have you hung out with a Muslim before? Have you been to the mosque? Have you been to church? Are you religious? And those are fucking way more than one question, so I don't know why I said that, but you know what I mean. I'd ask him these questions. Because I don't believe that he has. And I don't believe that a lot of the people who kind of spread this religious animosity, especially now, have met them, you know? Um, and one of the reasons why I think that this religious animosity has now rose is because of the administration that we currently have. I have not seen anything nearly to this extent during the Biden administration. Once Trump came in, I think that he made it allowed and cool to be racist almost, and to be anti-minority, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, and then anti-minority religion as well. You know, and it really just got me thinking: do these people really hate Muslims and Jews, for example, or Christians if you hate Christians, or do they just don't know anything? You know what I mean? Or are they just uneducated? Like I always tell my friends, I would never in my life be upset or have any animosity towards somebody who doesn't know any better, Like, let's say, for example, you live in the fucking, like, panhandle of Oklahoma, you know what I mean? Where there's 5 people living there, for example. The education is like, no offense to Oklahoman people, but, like, the education is like 49 out of 50 in terms of ranking for their education, And like, there's a white guy who lives in a population, a city of population of 1,000 people, for example. There's 3 or 2 black people there, So he doesn't know what black people, doesn't know any minorities, just knows white people. And then he goes on his Fox News, because he's a Republican, and Fox News is saying the Muslims are invading. You know what I mean? Some stupid shit like that. Or there's been a terrorist attack against the president. You know what I mean? Like, they don't know any better. They're just going to gobble what they're fed. And because of that, it's like, you guys are I have no hatred towards them. I don't feel anything towards them. I feel sad for them, honestly, because they don't know any better. That's all they've grew up on. They grew up on hating others, and they grew up on that type of fake news. You know what I mean? And right now, like, for example, Muslims haven't been the only ones that have been persecuted, and Jews weren't the only ones that were persecuted in America. And by persecution, I don't mean they've been arrested and lynched like, other groups have in America, but I'm talking about, like, anti-religious sentiment in the U.S., Back in the day, like in the 80s, it was all fucking like, fuck the Russians, fuck the Russians. And then 9/11 hit, and they're like, fuck the Iraqis, fuck the Muslims. And then now you have this, like, whole Israel thing going on, and everyone's like, fuck the Jews, fuck this, fuck that, So they've always, the ones who are uneducated have always had this type of, I guess, this animosity to a certain group that they're told to hate, And it got me wondering, especially that man that spoke to us today and had his very scholarly political things that he had to say to us, made me wonder why there is such a political animosity in today's age. Back when I was just mentioning a couple of minutes ago about, fuck the Russians, fuck this, fuck that, I still believe that there was some form of American unity at that point in time. I was never alive during those times in the 80s and 90s, but my father was, and my father lived in Flint, Michigan. And he was saying that before 9/11, like, everyone was American. Doesn't matter who you were, you know what I mean? You could be Muslim, Jewish, Sabian, you could be Christian. You are an American first, Um, and then he said, really, when 9/11 hit, it kind of switched. The tides, where they kind of got a little bit more tense. And he said that he's had friends for years and years that were, best friends with him. He used to work at a gas station, um, for a very long time, and he was saying that people would come in all the time and be extremely friendly, and they knew who they were, and they knew who his father was, and they knew that they were Muslim, and they were best friends. They would talk about things, do things the same way that they would do anyone else. And then after 9/11 hit, there was a little bit of tension there, but 20 years, 15, 20 years after 9/11, uh, it was fine. You know what I mean? I feel like it was great for Muslims in America, and I think it was great for a lot of religious minorities in America as well. Specifically in the Biden administration, I think that we had a great time. I heard any religious animosity during the Biden administration, even on social media. But now you have this new Trump administration with Pete Hegseth and Caroline Leavitt and all these, D plus students, you know what I mean, that are in office now, and I think they've made it cool almost to become racist and to become anti-religious and xenophobic. Yeah, America, you know, which that's not what America is. America is not, all for Americans only. You know what I mean? It was totally built off of completely different ideologies. But I've written some things down as to why I believe that theology is now such a big issue in the U.S., especially with religious animosity and religious tension. One, for example, is that religion becomes identity now. It's not just a belief. And what I mean by identity is that, like, people treat religion as who we are, as opposed to what we believe. And the criticism that they have comes from, family type of rituals or cultural rituals or ethnic rituals, as opposed to religious belief. It's like, I always use this example as well. It's like, like you scroll on fucking TikTok or Instagram Reels, and you see like this one guy who's fucking sitting crisscross making pani puri in the fucking slums of India, for example. You know what I mean? And I'm not gonna be like, oh, it's sanitary. It's obviously it's unsanitary. What that specific little tiny guy is doing. But what Americans, not just Americans, but what people tend to believe is that it's like, oh, fucking India's disgusting, disgusting. Oh my god. You know what I mean? Which is just blatantly not true. And the same thing happens with identity and religion. You'll have this one little tiny cultural difference, or even a family difference. You see, oh, this one guy, for example, in Dearborn, this one guy, horrible story. It was very tragic. This guy in Dearborn, he was schizophrenic. Um, he killed his father. You know what I mean? And I feel like the news, especially the right-wing media news, was trying to make it as it was some sort of Muslim thing. Like, this is not Islamic. You know what I mean? Obviously, we hate that shit. We don't like murder. We don't like this. We don't like that. You know what I mean? But all the comments on the Instagram Reels when it pops up, oh, this is what Islam is, religion of peace, religion of peace. You know what I mean? They take these little tiny moments of cultural difference or little tiny family situations, and they broaden it out to the entire spectrum of their religion. Same thing happens with Jews. You know what I mean? And it's a shame. You'll see this one Jewish guy who does whatever, I don't even know, and then all of a sudden it's all the fucking juice emojis and the Instagram comments. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous, in my opinion, the way that they broaden out this one certain scenario or one type of cultural difference, and they make it the whole religion. I mean, keep in mind, man, Muslims, like, they don't agree with this shit. They don't agree with a lot of stuff that's going on in the Middle East. You know what I mean? A lot of Muslims here in the U.S. are very much so against a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And I'm sure Americans, as well as Muslims, are against this fucking useless war in Iran. Which we all should be, because it's useless. We're spending $1 billion a day for what? But we can't use examples and predominantly negative examples to blanket the entire religion for all three religions, all three monotheistic religions that we have predominant in the U.S. And obviously not just for those three; it's for everything else. One thing as well is that we have never seen, in my opinion, at least in my life, I've never seen more of a mixture of church and state than there is today. You know what I mean? We used to have a blatant separation of church and state. We, although are a Christian country, we're built off secular laws. You know what I mean? We have a secular state government. We have a secular federal government. But now in this Trump administration, they've changed it to where it's like, this is a Christian country. This is a Christian. You gotta leave if you're not Christian. You know what I mean? If you don't believe in Jesus Christ. Um, you know, and like for example, like Caroline Leavitt. Have you guys watched the press conference? Not press conference, but when she was up on stage trying to ask questions, when she was speaking for the president, she was like, "Hey guys, like, sorry I'm a little bit late. I'm sure you heard me, praying. I'm sure you heard the big amens that we had." In the back there, we were just doing a little group prayer, you know? It's stuff like that that has made this religious animosity very difficult, in the US. It's the president and the administration has made it so to where if you are not a Christian, then it's made as if you don't belong. You know what I mean? Um, and I don't even think Donald Trump knows what Islam is. He doesn't know anything about the religion. I don't think Pete Hegseth does either. Pete Hegseth has a fucking kafir tattoo on his bicep. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't know what any of this is. And they've made it now, and they've politicized this anti-Islamic and anti-Jewish movement to the point to where it's like, if you aren't with us, you are bad. You are a bad guy. But they don't even know that we are with them. So they're just blanking it out, making it out to be as if, oh, you're a fucking Muslim? Well, fuck you. You know what I mean? It's insane. Um, and another point that I made that I was already talking about is that people rarely interact deeply with other faiths. They don't know a lot about Islam as a religion or Judaism as a religion or Christianity as a religion. And if they really read into it, they would realize that Christianity and Islam are very similar in their beliefs. You know what I mean? You can see examples like in Ethiopia, where the early Christians in well, not early Christians, I would say, but the Christians who've been there for thousands of years, they react very similarly and they act very similarly to the Muslims do. They pray the same way that we do. They have culture the same way that we do. You know what I mean? And it's this Western style of Christianity that has become mainstream. That is very different. To other traditional styles of religion that has caused that major animosity as well. But even the Western style is very similar. We have similar beliefs. We believe in one God. God is Him. Islam doesn't believe that Jesus was the Son of Lord. That's one main difference. But in terms of faith and ideology, it's very similar. We both believe in the act of giving to charity. We both believe in the act of, loving your neighbor and loving your enemy. The only thing that I have not noticed in the Bible that is stated in the Quran, which I could be wrong, is the difference of opinion when it comes to dealing with an oppressor. An oppressor and enemy are two very different things. An enemy, for example, would be like the guy, that came out up to us today and started chanting death to Allah, curse Allah, you guys are fuckers, things like that. I would consider him, what the book states as an enemy, but I also don't hold any animosity to him because we're taught to love our enemy and we're taught to love them and to cherish them and to guide them into the correct path. An oppressor is somebody who kills in the name of religion or kills in the name of an ethno-state, for example. That's a true oppressor. And in the Quran, it states to treat them the way that they treated you. I haven't noticed anything like that in the Quran, but not in the Quran, in the Bible, but I could be wrong, But regardless of all that, from what I've been saying, it's a very similar religion between the two. So for those who don't know much about Islam or know much about Christianity, I encourage you to learn about the religions, you know what I mean? And feel and experience the fact that they are one and the same, the list of prophets that come off, it all came from one God, which was him, God. You know what I mean? He was the one that created Christianity. He was the one that created Judaism. And then in the Islamic story, it was the people that were corrupted. And he then created Islam. You know what I mean? Which, then again, you can see that the people have kind of corrupted it as well, but that's a different story. Another thing that I wanted to state is that you see a lot of these social media and a lot of these news outrages that come out. You see so many things from the algorithm on Instagram Reels, TikTok that amplify the conflict because anger gets attention. It just gets the clicks. You know what I mean? People love when their faith is on top and acts like the savior to the enemies of the world. You know what I mean? Like peaceful interfaith debate doesn't go viral. You know what I mean? If a man and a woman, or not a man and a woman, if a Christian and a Muslim, came together and shook hands and hugged each other very brotherly, it wouldn't get clicks. But if you saw a fucking Christian guy going up, like the guy in Texas, where he goes up to this group of Muslim people and he's like, bacon, bacon, while they're praying, you know what I mean? He's like, you are praying to a false god. Obviously that gets clicks, and that gets clicks from a lot of the, I guess I would call them neo-Christians, and it does go the opposite direction as well. I mean, it's the same animosity towards Jews. You see a lot of Jewish hatred here in the U.S. now, which is, not great, at all. Any sort of religious animosity is not great. And people, I feel like, especially in the Jewish portion, they fail to distinguish the difference between an Israeli ethno-state and the Jewish religion, which they are two completely different things. So it's the same thing that's been happening over here. Media always sparks outrage, and it rewards outrage as well. One thing that I wrote down here is fear of cultural replacement. I hear it all the time. The Muslims are invading. The Muslims are invading. I just want to state the fact there's only 4 million Muslims in the U.S. It's 1% of the population here in the U.S. is Muslims. So if you think that we're invading, then you guys need to go back to math school, because that's just completely not true here. Same with Jews. I mean, I think Jews are like 0.2% of the American population. Like, what are you guys even talking about? You guys are like a 60%, Christian country. You know what I mean? And also, to go to that ideology, what does taking over even mean? You know what I mean? Like, I always hear Sharia law. There's, in like Epic City, Texas, they're implementing Sharia law. Firstly, no, they're not. And secondly, this is a secular country. You know what I mean? It's a secular law. Do you want to impose like Jesus Christian law onto the world? How would that be any different than Sharia law being imposed here? Which is not. It's not even imposed. None of it's imposed. It's all just a made-up thing, And then one thing over here that I also wrote down is that economic and social frustration gets redirected. When people get angry about like loneliness or losing their job or housing, corruption, for example, they channel that frustration into religious conflict because it becomes visible. It gives them basically a visible option to blame. You know what I mean? I see it a lot in the Muslim community, where it's like some guy will like lose a fucking football game. You know what I mean? They'll watch the game. It'll be the Chicago Bears versus 49ers, and Caleb Williams throws the final play, and then it doesn't connect, and then the 49ers win, and then they're like, oh, well, it's the fucking Jews. It's the Jews. Like, what are you fucking talking about, bro? Happens every day, man. Not every day, but it happens, often that I hear it. And it's the same thing with the Christians. The Christians blame the Jews for everything, too. And then the Jews blame the Christians. Like, it's just all like a revolving cycle, you know what I mean? So economic social frustration definitely ties into that blame the religions type mentality. I have a lot more, but I feel like this video has already gone quite long, so I'm just gonna end it off over here, which is that people use religion for power. There's a lot of evangelicalism. Is that how you say it? Evangelicalism? That happens here. You have religious leaders, politicians, a lot of influencers, and a lot of activists as well, who intentionally they deepen the division because fear and the identity of their religion are powerful tools for building loyal audiences. And one example that I can use very much so is Jake Lang. The guy who fucking got a goat and brought a goat to New York. What the fuck are you even thinking, dude? What does that do? That doesn't do anything. You think that like the Muslims are gonna salivate? Oh, I'm getting horny now. Goat. Like, are you actually a dumbass? I've never even heard of this. What are you talking, dude? He's just an animal abuser. He's bringing a goat out. He's slapping this goat in front of like the city hall in New York. What are you thinking, bro? What does that even do? Jake Lang, he uses that division to garner an audience and to garner loyalty. Same with people like, I wouldn't say him, but I'm not going to mention his name, but um, people like Jake Lang, you know what I mean? They say a lot of anti-Muslim things. He says a lot of, uh, really that's it, just anti-Muslim stuff. Um, and he garners an audience for it and an audience that loves that type of stuff. So stuff like that is really contributing to the animosity in America. Um, and basically, most religious people in America, I mean, they just want the same stuff. You know what I mean? They want safety, they want a family, they want a purpose, and they want a community. You know what I mean? Um, but politics and the media, they train them to see each other as enemies almost, before they ever even meet. Isn't that crazy? We're trained to hate each other, but we don't. Sorry, my video cut out. What is this called? QuickTime Player on my Mac. It's, I think, the worst app I've ever used. So I'm gonna have to download a new app here. But what I was gonna say is, religions, they just want to. Most people, in America, they just want to see safety, family, purpose, things like that. But the media trains them to see each other as enemies before they even meet them. Which is crazy to me. So I would encourage you guys, man, like, if you want to do something in your day, if you're bored or you don't have anything to do, meet somebody of a different religion. Meet a Muslim, meet a Christian, meet a Jewish person, um, meet someone who follows Hinduism, meet anybody, you know what I mean, that practices a different faith, and talk to them and ask them these questions. I would ask them things, who is your Lord, and what do you believe in, and what do you want to do with your life? 100% of the time, or 99.9% of the time, they're gonna say things like, "Oh, I want to be a plumber. I want to be a accountant. I want to be this. I want to be that." They're not gonna say like, "Oh, I want to be a fucking like evangelical terrorist in the world, against the people of America." You know what I mean? They'll never say that. So that's it for me today. I know this was a lot of just jumbling and ranting, and I don't expect many people to watch to the end of it, which is fine. Um, but I think I'm going to start doing a lot of different things here. I definitely want to do some more street interviews in Chicago. I think that there's a lot of voices here that need to be heard, and I think every voice needs to be heard. Just I think that the right voices need to be heard a little bit louder. You know what I mean? So go ahead, let me know what you guys think. I'll probably come out with a video here in the next couple days. I have a video thought up of like why Chicago just sucks ass now, but that'll go ahead and come up later. So thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate your time, and you have a good rest of your day now.